I just got to a point where the bank didn't want me to go, and so there had to be a choice. It's like I have to go and follow my own heart, or do I just stay and take the money? And 100%. I mean, we're actually able to, in many cases, to just use ChatGPT to write API integrations for us now. Like we just go in there, we feed in the API documentation, tell it what we need it to do, and it gives you about 80%.
We talked a little bit about data. We talked about what go-to-market is and the kind of input data. If I was to hire your company, or if I'm the CEO, how do I measure go-to-market?
What we do as a business is through our own methodology, which we guarantee to optimize your go-to-market in 30 days. And then we guarantee to reduce cost of customer acquisition by up to 20%. And we also guarantee within 90 days to increase retention.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Jocelyn Houle at BetterTech IO, and I'm super excited to welcome Paul Sullivan from Arise GTM. Welcome, Paul.
Hey, Jocelyn, how you doing?
Good. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you about go-to-market, which is really at the heart of so much of what's going on in Silicon Valley and startups. And I know there's going to be a lot of really interested founders as well as established business people listening in today. Before we get started, though, can you tell me a little bit about Arise GTM and what your journey was to get there?
Yeah, so my main background was originally investment banking, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, the big hitters. I actually ran a swaps desk before I jumped ship, and the reason I say I jumped ship was I started to get a passion for technology. I suppose I've always had a passion for technology. Got into some change the bank programs towards the end of my official banking career, and then I wanted to not trade anymore, and I wanted to go and work in what became fintech, right? And I just got to a point where the bank didn't want me to go, and so there had to be a choice. It's like I have to go and follow my own heart, or do I just stay and take the money? And I think as much as I love investment banking and everything it gave me, the politics in there are just a little bit too much for my taste. So I jumped ship 2008. Probably the wrong time ever in history to bail out of banking, even though banking sort of fell apart at that point.
It seemed like the smart move at the time.
Yeah, it did. Not so much when you've got a mortgage, though. So that happens. I ended up. My first business actually was a publishing business. I'm a really strong copywriter, and just fell into it. Pivoted 6 months later into e-commerce, just because we just realised that there's no money in advertising. And then ended up working with like Nike, Adidas, some really big retail brands, Sky. That happened really fast. Thought that I'd kind of cracked the code and blew that business up, so that wasn't the best experience. And then I started consulting, and then by 2014 I was the number one influencer on Twitter in insurance tech. um I'm not great at social, so it was more just by volume than anything else. And then 2015 opened my first consultancy business and rebranded in 2017. And that business has been running 9 years now, and we've just rebranded to Arise GTM. And then the reason Arise GTM became around was because at the beginning of COVID, I created the Arise go-to-market methodology, which I've trademarked and I now own, which is a framework for comprehensive go-to-market. So end-to-end discovery to product development, and I've really worked on simplifying how do we answer the go-to-market question.
Great. I want to ask all about that. I have a long history working with startups of all sizes, and go-to-market is kind of thrown around as a term in a lot of organizations. In the venture world, that's kind of the centerpiece now. It's like, oh, well, we're going to do go-to-market for you just for fun. Why don't you and I just say, what exactly do you think GTM is?
So for me, go-to-market is how the business units execute on the business plan. So it's not sales and it's not solely marketing. It's how all of those units, finance, tech, RevOps, whatever you want to call it, is how product, they all come together and they execute together on the business plan. That's how I define go-to-market.
And how do you see that as different from being like a product manager or like a lead for growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think
They are. I'm just being
yeah, you
picky.
said at the beginning of this call that that go-to-market is changing rapidly, and it is. And I feel like there's some inherent problems in the space, and marketing for me, even though I've got a real strong marketing background, are a massive problem. as much as they are part of the solution. I feel like since the turn of the century, we've been saying closer alignment of marketing and sales, better personalization. And if that's 25 years, that's a long time for the same problem to remain prevalent in an industry, right? So ABM's come back to the fore, but did it ever really go away? It's a great way to go to
Right.
market.
You said
Completely
ABM.
aligns. Yeah,
For
ABM,
our listeners, if you're not familiar with it, for
sorry.
listeners, account-based marketing. So this
Yeah.
is where you're really focused on, I like to call it the big whale, right? You're out there really whale
Yeah.
hunting and you know everything about that customer and you get really deep. We used to call it kind of like strategic consultative sale.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's come back. No, it's interesting. I want to talk all about it because I do think there's just an interesting moment right now that even in the smallest companies, people are really jammed up in their silos of, well, I only do this marketing problem or I only do this. And I do think the go-to-market function is now called upon to synthesize a lot more, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's a great time to be a cross-functional specialist. This is the time to be that, right? You definitely need like people that go really deep, but I feel like there's a world where we're so focused on differentiation and segmentation, and we come up with all these new acronyms and customer marketing and demand gen and like actually the way I look at it is most segments are way overserved, right? So there's hardly any blue ocean segments anymore. There's a lot of competition. And so when we look at TAM, if we want to call it total addressable market, and you're building up your business case for making this play this year, we've got 350,000 target accounts. No, you probably don't. Like that might be the total number of available business types in that vertical, but they're not all for you. Like there's going to be some that are really well served by the solutions that they have. There's going to be people that might be underserved, but for other maybe political reasons internally, they're not going to be able to make a change. Some people might not have the power or decision-making strength. Some people might not have the budget. There are still companies trying to figure out digital transformation when we're walking into AI, right? So
I
yeah,
can't emphasize that enough. We may have to stop the show there, because I think like in tech, and I suffer from this from being like called like too cool for school, right? You're like, oh, this already happened. Everybody adapted to the cloud, for instance, would be a great example. 10%, 15% of most of the worldwide like TAM is really in this thing. And so it's very easy to say, oh, everybody's doing AI, but it's not really true. It sort of feels that way from the media. So anyway, I could talk about this forever, but I'm very interested in your framework. As you can see, I have a lot of questions about this whole space. Tell me a little bit about the framework. What is it and who's it for?
yeah. So I suppose originally, or I suppose the number one use case is for post product market fit, right? If you have identified your position in the market, you have a foothold, you know who you compete against. This framework is specifically for you, and then go up market from there.
I have something
And
terrible to tell you. You ready? Every time I work with VC, they seem to think product market fit means I have a customer who's signed a contract. What when you talk about product, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I do want to talk about the framework, but how are you defining product market fit out of curiosity? Like what would you
so,
optimally define it as?
like the whole business knows who its customer is. That's like if you went to any team and you said, "Who do we sell to?" They'd say, "Oh, we sell to banks of 5,000 people in North America, and that's all we do, and we solve this particular problem." To me, that's product market fit.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I hope they clip that out for LinkedIn and just putting that out there, because actually it's like if you walk around a company, it's very hard to get everybody to say the same thing on that very standard question. So anyway, sorry to interrupt you. Back to the framework.
Yeah, so I've written the book, and during writing that book, I kind of did not purposely read everyone else's books, right? Because I didn't want to have any influence, and I wanted to get back to a point of simplification. I think we're over complicating things, and so I brought it back to three simple questions. And for me, there's only three questions, no matter what size business you are. And they are: number one is, how do I convey the value of my product or service to my buyer or end user? That's the first question. That's positioning, messaging, storytelling, all that stuff. Second question is, how do I enable my buyer to buy from me? Today's market is not a one-to-one sale. We're completely selling to buying committees. There's complex decision makers. There's influencers, champions, and all of these other people that, even in $200-300 sales a month sales, there's 2 or 3 people that are going to make a minimum of that number of a decision, right? So how do I enable my buyer to buy from me? And lastly is, how do I plan to onboard, retain, upsell, or cross-sell my customer once I have them? And I think as a leadership team, not a marketing leader or a sales leader, as the C-suite leadership team, you should be saying, how are we collectively answering these 3 questions?
How have you found, so I love that, boiling it down. I do think we've made this into more of a science than it needs to be in a lot of cases. I've patiently sat through a lot of discussions of the funnel. So I do appreciate that you're kind of boiling it down for folks to just keep, because, you know, I know a lot of people just have regular 9 to 5 jobs, but I certainly know in the startup space, the volume gets turned up very quickly,
Yep.
right? It's very easy to get distracted. I know everyone says don't get distracted, but you have that big customer. When you're thinking about these pillars that you've identified, what are kind of red flag moments in your mind where you're getting away from the pillars? What should, you know, for me, I'm the CEO of like a 500-person startup and I'm adopting this. Like,
Yep.
what are the things where I'm like, oh, this is the part where go-to-market could go off the rails?
This is like when you just start listening to business unit leaders that try and champion their own thing, right? 100% about any go-to-market motion is that there is no one driver. And in fact, you said that you've worked with a number of startups, and so have I. And it's recently I was mentoring an accelerator program, and someone said that it's the first time someone's succinctly said this is what go-to-market means. She said sales is go-to-market and marketing is go-to-market, and I was like, yeah, because loosely everyone's part of that motion. So firstly, I always say it's strategy first, people second, technology third, and it should always be in that order. It should be, who are we going after, why are we going after them, and how have we define that? And then you move from there into, do we have the right people in place in order to enable us to do that? And that's a hard decision, right? And then beyond that is like, what is the technology that we need to have in place in order to deliver on the business strategy, right? And do we have the right people to manage that technology? Now, again, it's overly simplified because, you know, bigger teams, multinationals, complex international teams, all of those other things can be weaved into that. But what that really brings you back to is, I should not deviate from my ICP. And if I can't define the ICP through data, we've still got a problem, right? One of the things that we do as a consultancy business is we work a lot with HubSpot, as you know. We just define the report straight off. We drop it in, cloud-based drop, and it says straight away, this is your ICP, and it's based on a number of markers. So there's no more sort of like lick your finger and put it up in the air and see where we're trying to
Yeah.
go.
No, let me ask
Yeah.
about that actually.
Yeah.
This is turning into a therapy session for me, but a lot of times you'll work with organizations and leadership will say, and this has happened to me at very large companies like, you know, Capital One, Microsoft. It happened to very small companies under 8 people where leadership will say, well, you just need to talk to the CEO.
Okay.
And they'll
I mean,
understand. You just talk to the CISO for a Fortune 500 company, and that's our ICP.
Yep.
And so, first of all, define ICP and like why leaders in the business unit and of organizations should be thinking hard about ICP and who they really are.
Yeah, so the ICP is the ideal customer profile. And for me, this is not the persona. The ICP for me is
Talk about that.
industry. Yeah, it's the industry type, it's the business type, it's a bank, it's an insurance company, it's a bank of, as we said, 5,000 people that serves, I know, farmers in the Midwest or whatever that is, right? But that's the ICP. And then within the ICP, we have decision makers, and the decision makers champion, blocker, financial decision maker, all of those other people that are part of the buying committee. We need to identify them, and that's why CRM plays so much power into the go to market, and why we believe that's where you should, you build your strategy. So ICP is the kind of business. If you're a technology firm, is like, what technology, the technographics, what technologies are they using? Are they complementary? Can we come in? Are we going to go in and compete against someone? How do we outcompete those people? Firmographics. What do we know about the firm? Its location, the size, the revenue size, etc., etc. Appetite for buying. There's all these factors.
I like that.
Demographics. All of that sort of filters in there. And then you say, okay, and now that I've identified my company and we know that, and the easiest way to do it is to go into your CRM and say, who do we sell to regularly and what do they look like? And not only that, it's not just
already happening.
What's already happening? Who renews the most? Who churns the least? How do we, and just break that down by industry segments? And it's like, okay, look, these people, the sales cycle's quite short. They onboard really quickly. They rarely churn. They upsell on a regular basis. It's like that's the sweet spot, right? You can have the peripheral. Some people don't up. They just keep coming. They don't buy anything else, but they just use that product. That's fine. But you're obviously trying to always think about your revenue expansion and not necessarily net new revenue all the time. So who are we upselling? So that's question 1, 2, and 3 answered in one go there. And then you're saying, okay, how do we sell to these people? Who do we have to influence? Who do we have to make sure we're engaging with on a regular basis? And actually, when we analyze the sales process, when typically are the right people coming into the good deals? So that the behaviors around the sales process start to change. We're now not looking just at what communication's going out, but when should we anticipate we need to bring in the right kind of decision maker or influencer to the sales process to make sure that it's aligning to what we see work well on a regular basis. And you can start condensing your behaviors and your spend and the cost of customer acquisition, and you're going to increase retention and you're going to increase net profitability. And all those things come out of just doing the right things properly. And that's the problem. Everyone wants a shortcut. Everyone wants to shortcut the hard work, the gritty piece, the research. And I get it, because big consultancy firms have like earned a lot of money, charging a lot of money for a presentation. So people have kind of moved in the market. They're like, we're not paying you, a ton of money, 6 figures for you to give me a PowerPoint presentation.
About my customer, I already probably know. A lot of times, it's unsatisfying when you get those decks. There's a couple of themes I want to just touch on real quick, which I want to pull out from what you said. First of all, I love this idea of an ICP is not a persona. I can't emphasize that enough. I think that's amazing because I like the specificity of it. Let's say it is like a line of business leader in a risk organization for a top 10 bank. I like to play the game, who gets fired or who loses their bonus, right? Like under what, because a lot of times I feel like, especially in the tech world, we're like, well, they should want this because it's better. It's just a better, more efficient way, or it reduces risk. And generically speaking, big companies aren't going to rally around those statements. It has to be specific, right? If this person needs like a 0.5% better every year, or they lose their bonus, right? Like something sticky like that, that's really easy to understand. So I love what you're saying there, and I can't emphasize that enough. The other theme that seems to come up in a couple of your answers here is CRM. What role does data and ops and all the measurement take in your mind for really setting up go-to-market and then measuring it afterwards?
So this is a really good question because it's quite broad but quite deep. So CRM is probably the most important asset to a business. That is your first party owned data of customer engagement with the business. Now, the best go-to-market is where product meets customer facing teams, right? So for me, the CRM tells you who you sell to, how you sell to, and why you sell to these people, right? And a good CRM should be able to tell you that straight off the bat, right? Good reporting, good setup, good data analysis, you'll have that. If you can then start bringing product user data and pushing that data into the CRM, you can start saying, well, this is who we sell to, this is how we sell to, and this is why we sell to them, and this is the value that businesses like this get from our team. And typically, they get to this value very, very fast because we're analyzing how companies like you use our product, and therefore you can be really, really direct in the sale, and that shortens sales cycles. That's all about that 360-degree view of the customer, right? Because you're looking at retention, sales, attraction, you're understanding the customer journey. And in our business, we've taken that a whole heap further. So if you think about the product marketing things, the positioning, the messaging, the discovery, the voice of the customer, the win-loss, all of those things, the way that we built the CRM for tech companies, we've included all of that. We've already included an automatic renewals pipeline, and it's just a one-click install because the market's moved so far. I suppose traditional CRM specialists, they're going to talk to you about the things that you can do, and I'm always about the things that you get done. And it's just the other side of the coin, right? I don't want to be engaged and spend months and months talking before we actually do anything when I've pre-built based on, what is it now, 9 years of experience of working with B2B tech firms, what a CRM should look like. The KPIs are already built in there, the reporting's already built in there. What we typically do is pull out that data and push it back in. Now, I'm one of many firms that have moved to this kind of model, this cloud-based CRM model. But we're talking about, I think the recent data I saw was something about 2 trillion in lost opportunity just in North America. through poor, misaligned CRM data. Now that's just like business
It's a
numbers.
mess. I was actually going to try and poke holes in your argument, but you did it yourself. You came to it faster than me, because I think that's the thing. Like, if I had a great CRM, what couldn't I do?
Yeah.
Right. In a small company, or even in a large one, sometimes you can't even get that data. It's a weeks long process, or it's like what's called, I hate this term, tribal knowledge. Everyone's like, oh, this is definitely our customer, but no one's ever looked recently. So when you engage with customers, like, do you do an assessment of, like, maturity for their CRM, or like, how do you know what I mean? As a go-to-market, that's the key to your success. So you must be very, very concerned with that before even signing a deal.
Yeah. So Arise go-to-market methodology is 3 questions, 8 pillars, 5 steps. 385, right? 3 questions we've talked about, the 8 pillars we've talked about, and the 5 steps are the Arise framework. ARISE: assess, research, ideate, strategize, execute. Keeping it simple. So as soon as we are engaged, the assessment starts. We ignore all of the information we're given. That doesn't mean that we're not taking consideration of it, but our job is to get under the hood. Because one of the things I felt that I didn't do well as in my early stages was push back on the information that I was being provided, because a lot of the time agencies and consultancies are brought in by business unit leaders, and they have their own prerogative, and they will convey what they want to give you, rather than, this is my business strategy, this is how we fit into that go to market for playing up into that, OKRs and all of that stuff, and I want to know, like, how are you aligned with the rest of the business? How have you come to, how are you analyzing your data? Does this match up to the standards that we've set ourselves, which are ISO standards? And so, to avoid the complication, we actually built a tool, because the easiest way to say is, I always say, what can't speak can't lie. So the data always has the reality. And if it's good data, you're going to get a good answer. And if it's bad data, you can see that. And one of the way we head this off is, I talked about this ICP dashboard. The other thing we have is a data hygiene dashboard. And when we do those 2 things, it probably saves 2 weeks of consulting time in sort of 20 minutes, because immediately, or within sort of 10 minutes, you say, okay, there's your ICP and here's why, and here's the state of your data, and this is what you need to do to fix it. So it looks at missing data, incomplete data. Do you have all of the job functions associated to decision making functions, and all of that stuff that helps you do strong go to market? Here's what you need to clean up. Here's how you can go about that, and then this is what we're going to take
So
forward.
do you ever break the engagement apart to do an assess and then deliver that information? They go away and fix it, and then you do the rest of your Rise?
Yes. So
Okay.
Arise, the Arise piece is the upfront piece of work. So we when you follow the Arise process from A to E, you end up with the answers. And someone said to me in the book, oh, you must write about ICP and ABM and stuff like this. And I said, actually, I write about ICP, but I talk about ABM and demand gen and inbound, but I don't go into it in depth. The book is not supposed to help you shortcut doing all of the other work so that you just read the ABM piece or the demand gen piece and then you can go and do it. It's more that if you follow the process, you'll get the answers, and out of those answers, you'll know which of these strategies is suitable for you based on.
It's so interesting. I mean, it's really, I've been doing product for my whole career, but product has changed so much over the years. When I started at Microsoft, a lot of it you did end to end, full box, and it looked a lot like what you're talking about, but no one's really doing that in as much today, because you're right. I think it comes handed down prepackaged from management. This is your product. This is who buys it. This is what we think about it. And that kind of space is not often made to question what we thought we knew. And so I like that. I like that a lot. I think it's a missing component right now. And a lot of companies are just sort of holding on even more dear for life to the old assumptions, and they may not be correct anymore. So that's a really useful pattern that you're bringing into the organization. That's maybe a different podcast we should talk about, but there's an alignment issue there, definitely. And one of the
100%.
things, I think it's amazing that you have these technical tools. So this works with like Salesforce or like whatever you're.
So we're working on the Salesforce piece, because the way that we can make it work with Salesforce is, if like over half of Salesforce users are now, if you're using HubSpot's marketing hub, we can actually we can actually mirror your Salesforce data in HubSpot, and then we can actually run the process there.
Amazing company. I love their stuff.
Look, Salesforce were great when they first came on the scene, right? And now, like everything,
which I sadly remember.
Yeah, and then now everyone else is coming in, and
everyone's like, "What? You keep a record of your customers?"
Yeah, exactly.
It's not on index cards. What? No, yeah.
I just love I love tech. This is me. I love watching what founders do. I'm loving how they're doing things. But what really got me was we keep talking about. I said it earlier on in this call. We've been saying closer alignment of market and sales since 2000. We've been saying more personalization since 2000. ABM's been around since 1994. For anyone that's listening, that's over 30 years ago. So like. A lot of these things, as one of my really good friends says, everything's just a rerun of an old black and white movie. And I love that phrase because it's like nothing's absolutely brand new. It's tweaked, redistributed, and it's the cyclical motion of life, right? We see it in fashion, we see it in sales, we see it in marketing, but AI has to be the biggest impact to go to market in since what, the 50s. I mean, the rate of acceleration by having tools that can automate data manipulation is ridiculous. And even with our business, one of our clients we're currently working with is a private airline company, and they went through a journey of the whole Franken tech, you know, the monster of machines just tied together. Then they went for a proper custom build CRM, which didn't work. We moved them onto HubSpot, and that does about 99.9% of what they need. But the one piece that we've already accounted for, and we saw this with Claude, or I think it was Anthropic, part of what they need to do is their team need to exit the CRM to go to another tool to bring the data back in. So what we did, we brought an AI company in to work with us to build the AI piece that stops their team having to do that administrative piece. And the owner of that business said, do you know what, Paul, I never would have thought about using AI in that way at this point in time. And yet now that I can see it for the 500 euros, whatever it's going to be for the API integration that he's got to pay and the one-off fee, he's like, I am weighing against headcount, against integration costs and all of that. And he said, and I can actually scale my team without needing to scale ops. So I can scale sales, I can scale service. I don't need to sell ops because AI is now sitting directly in the middle of my business. And I think that if you're not thinking like this, you are going to be left way behind, because I feel like we're accelerating 5 years every 12 months. I don't know what you
No,
feel.
it's
You're in
it
tech.
gives me heartburn. It's so going so fast. I'm actually writing a blog post about velocity right now because I think we almost have to throw out the ideas of velocity that we came to this party with. It's too fast. And I love everything you're saying there. Just for listeners who aren't familiar with the technology, a lot of people think of AI as just the LLMs, but newly, and Paul, you're focused on this B2B SaaS world. I think people are more focused on the agentic functions that can be plugged in much more quickly. What did you say, 500 euro or 1,000 euro?
Yeah.
1,000 euro, 8 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week to put it in place, reduce all
Yeah.
that friction and get the result. I would say in the olden days, wouldn't you say that would be like a custom integration, 3 people, 8 months testing, right? It would be a huge endeavor that most organizations frankly couldn't take on. So I mean the scale of the efficiency, I think, is something maybe people are still not digesting, like how different that is. Shocking to me, to 500 euro short implementation and to take away that much friction, which sometimes can be the break point for a lot of processes.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we're actually able to, in many cases, to just use ChatGPT to write API integrations for us now. Like we just go in there, we feed in the API documentation, we tell it what we need it to do, and it gives you about 80%.
For most use
And that,
cases, it works, right? It says
yeah,
this isn't, you're not building like a AWS level federal system. For most
exactly.
use cases, it works. So we talked a little bit about data. We talked about what go-to-market is and
Yeah.
the kind of input data. If I was to hire your company or if I'm the CEO, how do I measure go-to-market?
Oh, that's a really good one. So
You don't have to just answer in numbers. It's okay.
yeah, it's a hard one because you're trying to measure a state. So this is the current state of the business, and this is where we need to be. So what we do as a business is, through our own methodology, which we guarantee to optimize your go-to-market in 30 days, and then we guarantee to reduce cost of customer acquisition by up to 20%. And we also guarantee within 90 days to increase retention, so
All
reduce
right. I
losses.
like it. I like it.
Yeah.
So I think I'll flip the script on this question a little
Yeah.
bit, which is if you're a CEO or someone hiring go-to-market specialists,
Yeah.
these are the types of things that you're telling your customers. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but those are the types of measurements, or at least the right neighborhood of measurement. And then let's flip the script a little bit. If you're a go-to-market lead at a young company, if you're a go-to-market lead at a mid-sized company, what is your recommendation for me to
Yeah.
manage my constituencies, because you've got so many people watching what you're doing. You're in this super important, the most important part of the company, go to market.
So
How do you
relation-
manage expectations and get people to see what you're doing?
It's
You get it?
relationships. It's like anything. You always need to be an operating salesperson, like a sales engineer. You know, you probably need to build a deck that you can feed out to teams that explains what you're doing and why you're doing and how and don't use a generic deck. Build a deck for the sales team, build a deck for the marketing team. It's the same deck. It's probably just going to be tweaked by a few slides, right? But help people come to understand how they benefit from helping you. I think that's the key thing. And then so that's managing down, right? That's the managing down piece. But when it comes to managing up, I think things like the Arise go-to-market methodology, I think Moves, another book I read recently. There's a lot of good advice out there with frameworks. Now, Arise, what I liked about Arise was we included every single top tier framework. Ports 5 Forces, SWOT, all of the things that you would potentially do in a fragmented way, we curated that into a story. So it's like, assess where you are. Then we're going to ideate. No, then we're going to research. So then we're going to do the customer research, the marketplace research, competitor analysis, and all of that stuff. But we're showing you how to do this, right? You can go on my website, download this stuff. Then you go into the ideate stage. Blue sky thinking based on first party knowledge, cross-functional engagement. I want product in the room. I want sales in the room. I want finance in the room. I want everyone who touches a customer experience in that room talking about what customer engagement looks like for our business. And then we can just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks and what makes sense. Then we go into the strategy piece. So now I understand where I am. I now have a fresh take on the landscape and my customer base, and I really understand who my ICP is and my personas. I've ideated around that. We've come together and we've got the organization focused on this pinpoint new North Star. Now we're building out the strategy to get us there, which is cross-functional. So you're going to end up with a RevOps motion. You're going to end up with aligned teams, new KPIs, and then execution. It is simple in its process. And within that, we give you like 150 KPIs off the bat that you should be tracking, so that when you're in this mindset of what should we be doing, I don't want you to think that it's just a series of steps and there's no output. At every point, we've even told you what meeting to run and how to run that meeting with a predefined agenda, because we know how you should be moving through the framework and at what cadence if you are moving at a decent pace. And even if you're not, even if it takes you a little bit longer, if you can't do it in 30 days and you have to do it in 90, that's fine, but you still follow the program. You still run the meetings the same way. You still have the same agenda. And that is what gets you to the end, because you just get to do all the things that matter to you, which are understanding your customer, getting deeper understanding of your product, because a lot of people are so far removed from the product, they're often selling something they don't quite have. And what I like about when you bring product into the room is, products are often unaware from customer success about the frustrations of the end user. And so you start seeing these new relationships come together, and that's where you get the value.
That's right. I like that. I like this idea. There are a lot of what you've talked about. It's you're taking a lot of known strategies and tools and putting them into a framework that leadership can use as a guide. I think it's almost like a diet book. You know a lot of the things in your nutrition book, but it's putting it all together and, kind of, well, okay, now I know my competition. Now what? Like, how does that fit in? I think I don't know what you've seen, but I've seen a lot of companies, and I say myself, I've been a founder as well. You have your pet analysis, you have your pet theories, right? And it's very easy to be like, well, I did a competitive analysis and this is exactly how we should deal with product, but there's probably missing components there. And so the idea that you can kind of take all of these steps, the SWOT analysis, the idea, and kind of put them into, okay, well, now what do I do with this outcome? Okay, it's nice gating, kind of, you can get a way to gate out what you know and what you don't know, so that you can keep moving forward and not get jammed up. One thing I think is kind of interesting too about what you're saying, I don't want to ask too many hard questions, but it's very difficult to get organizations to focus on strategy, getting all this input information before they start going and just doing stuff.
Yeah.
Can you think of an example where you've had to manage that?
You have to manage that a lot. I think one of the questions you asked me earlier was, how do you align people around the go-to-market? And you did ask this earlier, and I think you've just asked it in a much easier way. And the problem for most business leaders around go-to-market is that people will always come ready to defend their position rather than open to learn something new, right? Everyone thinks when there's change, someone's done something wrong. And that's not necessarily the case, because if you approach go-to-market with a right and wrong mindset, you're already losing. If you approach it with an evolution mindset, you're going to start winning. We all get to a point where we plateau, and that's the natural growth of an organization. You have a growth spurt and it plateaus. Everyone starts with like, okay, everyone throws everything out the window, which you don't necessarily need to do. It's the good point to say, right, what's going on? It doesn't mean we need to lay loads of people off, which is often the case, which what people do is like, oh, there's no growth. Well, growth was flatline because you've been doing the same thing for far too long, and actually you should have been focused on learning and not just driving revenue, because they're two separate activities and one fuels the business. But if all you do is focus on revenue, then you don't really understand the numbers and what's affecting the numbers. And then when you have to do it, you go, oh, you mean it might take a big organization 7 or 8 months to unpick everything that we've been doing for the last 8 years as a startup, and that's something that we don't want to do. So there's inherent bias. I think that's the one, and it comes back to what I said in my book. Tech's never the problem, and process is never the problem. People are always going to be the problem in go-to-market, and that's whether someone wants to die on the hill that they've mounted. This is me, and that's all I'm going to do. You've got the people, unfortunately, that sit in the business and say, well, I'm just going to sit here and take the money until they decide to fire me. And I think you do yourself a disservice, and the company and your colleagues a disservice if you're kind of in that mindset. And it's probably a bigger conversation than today. But these are the kind of things that I run into. Then there's culture, and culture is a massive thing, right? Jocelyn, you've worked with a load of companies, right? My take on this is you start as a nice, small, cohesive group. Then actually you hit this marker where you start to scale, and all of a sudden you go into 5 business units. And now each head of business unit is just vying to get their thing done. And that's where you start to break. And then marketing's arguing with sales and customer. And then no one kills that. No one kills that culture. It becomes sort of tolerated. Oh, Paul and Jocelyn are going to be arguing today. I wonder how they get on today. And it's like everyone else is talking like that, rather than someone saying, listen, you guys are here to drive the business forward. You can have personal difference, professional difference, but while you're here, you have to work towards the goals of the business. And that's when you start seeing teams take sides. Oh, this team's rubbish. And it's usually the leaders of the two teams that everyone's kind of supporting. And this to me is childish behavior. I just want to win. I'm into winning, whatever way we're going to do that. Data enablement, win.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. I call it the awkward teen stage. After 80 people, you're at the worst of both worlds. You need process that you didn't have before, but you're actually not good at process. And people then end up getting into silos and things don't work and it's awkward. And you're right. I love what you're saying. People, you need to be thoughtful about getting out of that stage. And that's what I take away from what you said. And if anyone's listening here who's hiring or trying to really pump up their GTM function, this is what leadership can do.
Yeah.
Is to bring people to the table and ensure everyone that change doesn't mean there's winners and losers necessarily, right? I think the heads of lines of business are like, I'm going to win, I'm going to lose. This is going to be, what do I look like? I think that's one thing I see. And I don't know, you probably see this too, is like, because you were talking about this before, like focusing on where you're making money. Sometimes this is different from where you want to be.
Yeah.
And then you get 2 teams. You get like team status quo, and everyone's like, oh, I don't want to be on team status quo. I'm going to be on team future.
Yeah.
But, and I think leaders need to, that's a really, for entrepreneurs, certainly in the founder world, I think it's really important to set that tone, as you're saying, that people have a safe place to argue. They're all part of one mission-based focus. That is kind of part of, not to get woo-woo about it, because I do think numbers matter, but yeah. I like what you're saying so much about that.
There's something I wanted to come back to, and I made a mental note when you said it. Earlier on, you talked about the access. You said, oh, they tell you to go and sell to the CEO, and if you can sell to the CEO, you're winning. I mean, the getting to a CEO these days is like accessing Fort Knox, right? It's ridiculous.
And they've heard it all.
Yeah.
My concern too is we can't, I'm a pretty good salesman. I can get a meeting, but you kind of have to be ready for that meeting as well.
Yeah. And this is what I was going to say. You talked about it in a different way. But I always say to salespeople, if you're selling into the leadership team, think about this. You're making a sale of a product and the buyer is expending some political capital. So when you think that, why did they churn? The onboarding wasn't that bad. No, the onboarding was really bad because internally this person brought you in, and then your onboarding team, they had a bad case with them. Now this person looks really bad and has lost some face internally, some political capital has been expended. Sometimes people have to do deals with people they don't like to get something in. And then all of a sudden you go and create this bad handoff or whatever that is. Like that when I say question 3 is as important as 2 and 1, this is why I broke it down into those 3 questions, because if you can convey the value and you can navigate that buying committee, please do not tank it by not planning on how you're going to handle the onboarding when you get them. As you just said, you've got
No,
to
this is a huge
know.
problem. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's part
yeah,
of what you said too, is that people get bigger and they're like, "Well, I'm in sales. The sale's done. I'm
yeah,
moving on." Or
yeah.
I'm in deployment. I'm not going to worry too much about like all of these requests that came in. I don't need to talk to product because I'm in deployment. I know this is where this is kind of where the details matter. And what I like about
Hmm.
what you're saying is, a lot of what is in your book. Yeah, we can find a lot of the frameworks and discussions elsewhere, but it's this kind of the ability to lay it out in these chunks, that dominoes that fall. But also I like your theme, which is you just kind of can't forget what we're solving for and working
Yeah,
together, right? That's the
yeah,
magic. That's sort of the secret sauce of
yeah,
something like
yeah,
this.
yeah.
And it's easy to say and hard to do. As a leadership organization, as a go-to-market leader, it's hard to maintain. That takes, I would say, 30% of your job is to get that feeling going, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think go-to-market is a top-down motion as well, right? And to just to drop back a couple of conversations, we were just talking about founders, and you talked about the 80-point mark. And in my head, what happened was I saw this picture of a pyramid, right? And there's founders, and there's plenty of them out there, and I love them all because we're all unique. But there's some founders that set the business up with a pyramid. There's them at the top of this pyramid, and the whole business is set up to support them. And all of a sudden, they need to go flat, and they really don't know how to do it. And I think that's where you get the chaos, because it's almost like I own this business, it's my business, and you've helped me build my business. But now you're telling me I need to change the whole way that I'm approaching the growth of this business, but we've just grown here. I've worked with companies that have sold their way to 10 million ARR, right? And they're like, well, why do I need a new website? Why do I need more
10 mil ARR.
framework?
That's the 80-person point. That's like kind of where that like gangly teenager part comes in. And it's true,
Yeah.
I think, too, for division leads. I have a lot of sympathy for like enterprise leads within large organizations. They look a lot
Mhm.
like founders, right?
Yeah.
You get there because you have technical expertise, you get there because you know the customer, and then suddenly it's like, well, we're adding like hundreds and hundreds of people to your team. So it's not just I think what you're saying, go to market. I think we think about it in the startup or smaller business world, but every large company is just made up of small businesses similarly, and
Cool.
they need some of this as well because it's hard to execute in a complex organization as well. So this is all really good conversation. I could talk at length about this. I'm glad you had some examples to share with us. I think that's always helpful. When is the book available and where can people get it?
So you can get the book on pre-order. It's at Barnes & Noble, it's at Amazon, it's at Waterstones, it's at Books A Million, it's at bookshop.org, Porchlight.
Great.
Like all the main retailers, it's there for pre-order. It ships in 3 weeks, 17th
Oh,
of
great.
March, and it will be on your desk on the 1st of April. I really would love people to kind of give me their honest feedback. For me, it's a point of conversation. I think go to market, if you come in with a take on it, that's great. But for me, I look at time to value as part of go to market as much as I look at discovery, right? When I talk about those steps, you've got the discovery, the customer identification, you've got the storytelling, you've got marketing tactics, sales enablement, product development, all of that comes together. So for those that listen, it's about the collective and the way that you move the business strategy forward, which includes the technical product or the service, whatever that is. So that's what I want you to take away. And hopefully, what you get with the way that I wrote the book is this is how I just do it. I just do it like this, and it becomes a flywheel motion for you, and it can scale with the business. So that's what I wanted to take away.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such an important. I think people should take a look at this book. I've had a front row seat for this so many times that people get jammed up in one of these categories that you've laid out. They're not necessarily named or thought like they haven't thought about it as a step-by-step process, right? They get jammed up and like, well, we have this evidence, and then time gets lost.
Yeah.
So, I think it's really, really helpful to put it into that framework. And I will also read the book. I think it sounds great. Let me go to our rapid fire questions if you're
Thanks, Seth.
ready.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pick up a theme from earlier. Like, what do you think? What's one industry you think AI is really going to transform the most?
Medical. I just feel like the way that how long does it take us to analyze data and break things down? And I just feel like the learning capacity that AI has they're already seeing results in that space, but
Yeah,
I
it's
think
true.
the advancement of medical will be the best use case for AI outside of the workplace.
I'm totally impressed that you wrote a book. What are your what's a professional habit of yours that you think is your secret sauce?
I honestly, when it comes down to it, I'm just driven. Like I'm driven to learn. I just absorb everything I can. I'm totally cross-functional. I'm a qualified med pick, product marketing certified. I've built products. Like you have to immerse yourself in what you do. And if you can't, then don't do what you're doing.
I like that. Healthy obsession.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Who is like a tech leader in your mind, past or present, that you think is the GOAT?
So that's a really difficult question. I think that question's like asking, "What's your favorite film?" and then you're going to say, "What
I was
genre?"
just about to ask you that, but okay. Well,
Okay, we'll come to that. So I feel like who's my favorite tech person? I I genuinely couldn't tell you. I think
all right,
if
we don't have
I
to say favorites, but who's a tech leader that like sticks out in your mind or you quote a lot or
tell you what, who I often refer to is Kim Scott.
oh, okay, yeah.
She wrote Radical Candor, and I think
Mhm.
that's probably one of the best books on culture that you could read. And I think because I think people play a big part in the go-to-market, that's a great book to read.
Okay, good, good. What is your favorite movie?
My favorite, oh, uh, so I like thrillers, I like action, I like the gangster movies. I do like a rom-com as well, I will say. So I think one of my favorites has to be Shawshank Redemption. That's probably one of my
Hmm.
all-time favorites, but I could list them in genres, like honestly.
I love movies. I'm a 70s movies. I love the movies of the
There you
70s.
go.
So like I could watch Jaws every day, no
Jaws
problem.
is good. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, all right. Well, just one last quick rapid fire question. The best thing about this business, I bet you work with a lot of good leaders. You made a lot of really smart, talented people. What separates really good from really great?
So I think really good can be technically adept. That can be like, you know, healthily obsessed, as you say. But great leaders are they're humanly aware, I think, and there's a difference. You can be geeky and learn and become a master of all sorts. But I think when you're able to elevate beyond that knowledge and bring it back to people, I think that's what makes you great.
Great. Great stuff. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to seeing the book coming out shortly. Congratulations on getting that done and out, and congratulations on the new format. I hope everyone takes a moment to listen to the podcast and
Yep.
hopefully implement some of what you're saying right now.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate the invite.
Great to talk with you.